Hello everyone, this is going to be another squad guide video, but before we get into it, I'm going to remind you guys that
When's this new
squad
COD
is
gonna
on
come
sale for
out?
40% off on humblebundle.com right now, and I'll leave a link in the description, comments,
Do you
and at
know?
the top right of your screen. So we're going to get into the video here. This is going to be a very broad general
Everything
vehicle
comes
guide.
out
We're
in
going to go over a couple of
September,
the vehicles here
November,
and talk
October.
about what
It's
they're rated
fucking
for, what their
ridiculous.
capabilities are, and generally how to
Yeah.
keep them alive and things you need to be looking out for when you're utilizing these vehicles. So we're in the firing range right now and we're in admin cam and we're just going to look at a couple of these vehicles. The first ones we're going to cover are the only tracked vehicles in the game at this time. We're on patch 9.9 and these three vehicles are these three vehicles on your screen right here are the MTLBs. Now these are rated for anything up to 7.62, so anything at under 7.62 caliber weapons will not penetrate the hull of this vehicle, but they are vulnerable to IEDs, mines, RPGs, 50 cals, and anything higher than a 7.62 rated caliber right now. So the one on the left is the Insurgent MTLB. It's got a 7.60 turret on it. The center one has a 50 cal, and the one on the right here is the 30 millimeter. The 30 millimeter variant, obviously, it's just as weak as the other two. These are the weakest of the armored vehicles. They're about on par with the Humvee, so don't let their size and look fool you. These are pretty thin-skinned vehicles. But the one on the right, the 30 millimeter, can potentially go toe to toe with the BTRs and with the strikers because of that 30 millimeter cannon. A thing to note about the MTLBs is that they're really slippery to drive because of their track nature, so it does take a little practice to get used to that. But aside from that, they're really, really loud. So you cannot sneak these vehicles anywhere. You will hear these things from almost 500 meters out. So when you hear a loud tracked vehicle, it's an MTLB coming at you. And don't try to sneak these because they're incredibly loud. You can't sneak these anywhere. We're going to move on to the BTRs. We have the 14.5 version on the right and the 30 millimeter version on the right. These are kind of like the MTLBs. They're made for transport and light fire support. They're much beefier than the MTLBs. They can go toe to toe with strikers if they get the proper um, positioning. But still, the striker remains right now in patch 9.9 the strongest vehicle. But the 30 millimeter BTR can destroy strikers rather quickly with that 30 millimeter cannon. That is the biggest weapon in the game currently. Anything to note about the BTR is that it's incredibly versatile. You can use it for fire support. It's pretty tanky. You can use it for transport. One thing, an overarching strategy you want to work with on all vehicles, you want to look out for two main things on all vehicles. Number one is are mines, and number two are windows and driving into cities. For example, on Al Basra, you very rarely, very, very, very rarely ever want to be driving any kind of vehicle into a town or into a city. You want to keep the vehicles out at distance, engaging targets at range, and using the optics on these vehicles. So once again, if you have not used the optics in these vehicles before, if you get into the turret, you hit the Q button on your keyboard, and you'll be able to zoom in even further than that original optic. So make sure you use that Q button. It's incredibly powerful once you're in that turret. But yeah, these BTRs are meant for beefier fire support and transport. They can take more hits than an MTLB. They can take about 3 RPG hits, while the MTLB can only take 2. Moving on here, we have a couple of transport trucks, very basic. They just carry troops. That's pretty much the extent of the transport trucks. Yeah, we're gonna move on to the uh, US vehicles. So there's transport and Logi. I don't think there's any loaded Logi here, but Logi trucks usually have supplies in the back, in the bed of the truck. And that's when you know how a Logi has full supplies and is going somewhere to dump supplies. So you want to be on the lookout when you're looking at these logistical trucks or these trans trucks, seeing what's in the back. If it's troops, it's a troop transport. If it's loaded with crates and stuff, it's a Logi and it's going to a fob. So you can kind of read that information sometimes and say, hey, look, there's a full Logi going that direction. They're setting up a fob over on the west or wherever it's headed. So just little bits of information that you can use and pick up on when you see certain vehicles. Now, right here in the center of this green vehicle is the Striker. This is the strongest armor-wise vehicle currently in patch 9.9. It can take more damage than a BTR, take more damage than an MTLB, obviously, and it is fitted with a 50 cal crows on the top, as you can see. Now, this thing has very good optics. It's got good strength and it's got good armor. So the only thing you really need to be looking out for with the Striker, the main killers for Striker, are the hat kit, IED bikes, and mines. Mines, hat kit, and ID bikes are the death of the striker, simply because it's not necessarily that fast. So IED bikes can roll up on it and detonate. The size, this thing is pretty large. The size of this thing means that it's very easy target for hat kits to hit. And then you need to be careful with the mines, especially driving on roads or driving over bridges. Your driver needs to be looking at the ground, whether he slows down or not. You need to be paying attention to where you're driving. That's very, very important. One of the things you need to be aware of as a striker gunner is your positioning, because usually when you're playing with strikers, you're going against insurgents, and insurgents have bikes that are extremely maneuverable. So you need to have that gunner. His head needs to be in a 360 swivel, because you get a bike with a lat or an ID and they roll up onto you, the striker's in big, big trouble. So you need to make sure that you're covering all the angles on the striker, making sure that you have distance around you, 360, to deter any kind of hat bike or IED bike rolling up on you, and making sure you're constantly checking your angles, because you've seen me grab the hat kit, jump onto a bike, and just run around blowing up vehicles because they're focused on engaging targets in the town. You need to have some sort of either security or an aware gunner to keep this vehicle alive. But yeah, mines and hat kit, main killer of the striker. But it can go toe-to-toe with any vehicle. It can pretty much destroy all of these vehicles in a head-to-head fight. The only exception would be a 30mm BTR getting the first shot on the striker. That is a very close battle. A 30mm will shred through any armor. It pretty much like 4 shots a logi, and it can do some massive amounts of damage to the striker. So that is when one vehicle weakness to the striker is that 30mm, whether it's on an MTLB or whether it's on a BTR. This right here, we have the MRAP. It's not really mine resistant right now. I think they plan on making it mine resistant, but don't let it fool you. In patch 9.9, these things do not take a mine. You cannot drive over mines with these things. This one has a crows outfitted, but there's also a open top variant of this MRAP. These are just as strong. I think they might be a little bit stronger than the Humvee, but they take about, no, I think they're the same strength actually. I think these MRAPs take about 2 lat shots before they pop. Most vehicles here do take 2 lat shots, with the exception of the BTR and the Striker. But yeah, just one of the infantry light support vehicles for the US. Here we have a standard Humvee, both open top and crows variants. These are very thin skinned. Once again, these are still rated for 7.62 and excuse me, 7.62 and below. So every vehicle here, except for the Logis and the Techies, are rated for 7.62. So the BTR, the Striker, the MRAP, the Humvees, the MTLBs, all those armored vehicles, and including the Scout Car, those are rated for 7.62 and below. The Technicals, which you can see here, the trucks, and then the logistics and the support trucks and the trans trucks, those can all be damaged by light small arms fire. So these Humvees are pretty standard vehicles. They're useful for light transport and light fire support. You have to be very wary in the open top, as you can be shot out of that turret. However, a tip that I have for Humvee gunners, if you look up and angle the gun up, your character model will sink down into the shield, as you can see, surrounding the gun. So that's one little tip you can have. Another tip you can have is, if you're just running a driver and gunner in the vehicle, is if you get out of that gun and go back into a passenger seat, you'll once again be protected by that 7.62 rating. This is the Scout Car. This is one of my favorite Scout vehicles in this game, simply because it is extremely maneuverable. This thing is fast. It can turn on a dime. It's small. It's silent. And one of the best things about it is that it's fitted with a 14.5 turret on the top. So that is the same turret, if we look over here on the left, same turret as the MTL, or excuse me, as the BTR here. So it does just as much damage as the MTLB, or excuse me, BTR, but it is a little bit weaker, obviously, for its size. So you can still do a lot of damage with this thing, exposing enemy flanks and hitting unexpected angles with that speed and precision. Now we're going to move on to a couple of the technicals. We have at the left, we have a rocket technical. We used to see me use this a lot before mortars were added. This is basically an indirect fire solution for insurgents. You can angle that rocket in the passenger seat using the W and S key, and then the driver gets the azimuth down. And you can pretty much dump, I think, around 30 rocket rounds, inaccurate rocket round targets. So very fun to use. It's incredibly, it's probably one of the hardest vehicles to use right now. But it's incredibly awesome when you hear and see those rounds land. The center vehicle is the insurgent answer to enemy armor. It is the SPG technical. It's got a SPG recoilless rifle attached to the back of the bed of the truck, and it's extremely fast, it's extremely quiet, and this thing does a lot of damage with almost zero drop. So you can hit targets pretty far out with the SPG techie, and it's pretty much their answer to enemy armor. It's incredibly effective. If you're able to get an SPG in the correct location and engage at the correct time, you can take down BTRs, you can take down strikers, you can take down almost anything with the SPG truck, but it is extremely weak, as you can tell. It's just a truck. It's going to pop. If you get sided in this thing against another vehicle, you're dead. If you play those angles and hit those flanks with the SPG truck, you can be incredibly deadly. We have the Insurgent Technical, which of course just has a Dishka mounted on the back. There are two versions, the shielded and unshielded version of the Dishka, but this one is unshielded. So the shield obviously provides you a lot more cover to the gunner, but the sight lines are reduced to a small slit in the center, so it's a lot harder to see stuff. But yeah, it's just a standard fire support vehicle. You can't really use it for much else. You can, once again, with the speed of the technical, use it to hit enemy flanks and angles, but it's incredibly thin-skinned. You're going to pop as soon as you get spotted by anything. Even small arms, like a rifleman with an optic is able to disable these vehicles. So you have to be incredibly sneaky and really play those flanks when you're using these vehicles. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I might have gotten a couple things wrong, but I think for the most part, that is the majority of the vehicles in 9.9. Once again, just a small overview. The MTLBs, BTRs, support trucks. You have the Striker, MRAP, the Humvees, the Scout Car, and then the Technicals. All of the armored vehicles are rated for 7.62 and below, so 5.56 and 7.62 small arms will not penetrate the MTLB, the BTR, the Striker, the MRAP, or the Humvees. You can shoot the Humvee gunner out, though. And then, yeah, all the other vehicles are vulnerable to 5.56 and 7.62. Just a couple things, a couple broad reminders. This is a very broad guide. We'll probably go into more exact vehicle guides later on. But a couple of the broad guides, once again, when you're driving the vehicles, be mindful of where you're driving. This goes for mines on the roads and bridges. Be mindful of those, but also terrain. Make sure you don't get stuck on trees and you're not driving through valleys and getting the vehicle stuck, flipping the vehicle. You need to be safe with these vehicles. These are pretty important assets, so you don't want to flip them or drive them recklessly. Stick somewhere where you know you can navigate reliably, so don't try to like drive through a whole creek bed of rocks and stuff like that or fly off of cliffs. Because then you're just going to lose a vehicle. So be mindful of the terrain and things around you, mines and rocks. And then do not ever bring armored vehicles into an urban environment or a close quarter environment unless explicitly told you by the squad leader, because the closer these vehicles are to walls, buildings, and windows, the more angles that lat gunners have to engage the vehicles, because the vehicle's so big and lat gunners and other solutions are so small that putting these large vehicles within urban environments, within streets, cities, with windows and walls and doors is pretty much night for the vehicle, because you can only cover one sector with that main gun, and then the whole rest of your body of the vehicle is exposed to lat fire and other solutions. So be mindful of driving into CQB environments and be mindful of where you're driving. Other than those, so long as your gunner and your driver are communicating properly, which is a video for an entirely different video, you guys should be pretty much good to use these vehicles. Drive them around if you can a little bit before you use them. But those are my general tips, general overview of each vehicle here. The only vehicle not here is the motorcycle, and it's just a motorcycle. It's exactly what you expect it to be, so I don't really feel like I need to go and explain that. But yeah, hopefully this helps you identify some of these vehicles. I know a lot of players get caught up saying like, oh, BTR! BTR, it's a BTR. It's a Striker. Don't do that, because it gets experienced players angry because it's not a BTR. This is a Striker. Know the vehicles. Learn the vehicle's sounds. We talked about sounds in my other guide video. Learn about the sounds and learn about what they look like. This is an MRAP. This is a Humvee. You got the BTRs and the MTLBs. Learn what they sound like and what they look like. That way you can call out information correctly, like we talked about in my first guide video. That's pretty much going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to check out humblebundle.com for 40% off on Squad for the next week and a half. But thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Want to help support the channel? Head over to patreon.com/Karmakut, where you can get rewards for backing me.